In southwest France, the marriage of wine and culture is a tradition centuries old. Bordeaux, with its harmony of history and terroir, has come to exemplify the majesty of fine wine. In the world of wine, Bordeaux is one of the most recognized and treasured. Collectors are happy to pay hundreds of dollars a bottle for top wines like Chateau Margaux to get them into their collection. But what's often overlooked with all the fame and glory these wines attain is that they really only represent 5% of the total Bordeaux market. Merci, monsieur. Merci. Bordeaux produces a wide range of wines. To put things into perspective, there's as much wine produced in the region of Bordeaux as in many entire New World wine countries. The region has over 13,000 growers, 9,000 chateaux, and 57 different appellations. In this episode, we're going to travel through Bordeaux and discover all that it has to offer. The 18th century city of Bordeaux is a thriving metropolis at the heart of the Bordeaux region. Built on trade, the city is France's southwest port with commercial links across the globe. The city is an undiscovered pleasure of French culture and charm. Although sometimes overshadowed in terms of tourism, the slower pace contributes to the Bordelais' ability to appreciate food and fine wine. Even today, Bordeaux remains the capital of the wine world. The Garonne River, the region's main thoroughfare, flows in and out with the rising tide, making the city built on its shores a natural port. By the 17th century, merchants of various nationalities began establishing firms on the bank of the Garonne to act as négociants, or agents between the wine producers of Bordeaux and the world marketplace. So that today, the people at large celebrate the pride of Bordeaux.
The core reason why people are interested in what we are doing is just because it's terribly good to drink. So it's a great wine. Gives a pleasure. You look at it, you smell, you swallow, and you feel better.
I think when you think about wine, European wine, the first thing you think about is Bordeaux. Bordeaux is the center of the wine world.
Bordeaux's prominence as a wine region today can be traced back to one famous document. In 1855, Emperor Napoleon III wanted to showcase the finest wines of the country at the Paris Exposition. So he challenged recognized brokers of the day and had them develop a list ranking the chateaux of Bordeaux. And this is the list. It's known as the official classification of 1855. Many of the great names then are great names now. Latour, Margaux, Lafite, Aubryon, Rothschild. Here was the origin of the concept of fine wine. Wine sold by the bottle with a sense of place and history included. Other classifications followed and expanded throughout Bordeaux.
Bordeaux is certainly not just expensive wines. However, those expensive wines are the symbol of Bordeaux and, as the French would say, the locomotive. They're what drive the industry here.
But we're here to discover and demystify the broad elements of all Bordeaux wine. The center of the wine world became such because it produces wines for every lifestyle and every budget. Even today, the styles of Bordeaux wines have and are evolving, due as much to the competition from the New World producers as to the differing taste of an expanding marketplace. With thousands of chateaux producing wines, each distinct to its terroir, the vast array is perhaps the most dizzying aspect of the industry. How do we make sense of it all? Well, the first step is geographic. Bordeaux, with 100,000 hectares under vine, is France's largest quality wine region, located on the southwest coast. The main waterway is the Gironde estuary, with its two tributaries, the Dordogne and the Garonne, which serve to divide the region into three distinct zones: the left bank, Entre-Deux-Mers, and the right bank. Each and every bottle of Bordeaux is made under the Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée, or AOC, regulations. The label indicates geographically where the grapes have been harvested, and in the case of a chateau, where the wine was made, all of which contribute to the concept of what the French call terroir.
The whole ethos of Bordeaux is based on terroir. And terroir means not only the ground in which the grapes are grown, but also the atmosphere, the weather around, and drainage. It takes into account all kinds of aspects about how that grape was grown.
The main thing to remember about Bordeaux wines, both red and white, is that they are a blend, and that thereafter they are a blend of really principally three red grape varieties: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc, in various combinations depending on where you are in Bordeaux, and Semillon and Sauvignon for the white.
The most readily affordable wines of Bordeaux come from grapes harvested from all areas of the region. This is usually the product of a négociant who is involved in the entire winemaking process, from the purchase of the grapes to the final blending and aging of the finished wines.
Making a blend is just trying to bring to the consumer the most complex and harmonious wine you can make.
Paz Espada is a winemaker for the Négociant Calvé, in business since 1818. In response to increasing competition from New World wines, Calvé, like others in Bordeaux, has been revitalizing itself.
I don't think we have to copy, because the interest people have always had in Bordeaux is because there was a special personality. I think we don't have to lose this personality, because we will never make the same kind of wines that the New World. We're not in Australia, we're not in Chile. We are in Bordeaux, and we have to understand what Bordeaux is and try to improve the quality as much as we can.
The basic grape varieties used for the blending of Bordeaux red wines are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, with Cabernet Franc, and to a lesser extent, Malbec and Petit Verdot to round off particular styles.
Cabernet Sauvignon brings acidity, tannins, so structure, spiciness, aging capacity. Merlot, for example, brings fruitiness, the floral side, the violet, the rose petal. So both seems to be logically a good complement, a good balance. And Cabernet Franc brings more or less between both. It is spicy, but at the same time, it brings acidity, so it is fresh and brings aging capacity too.
The winemaker can actually adjust the quantities of these different grapes in different years. So if one year the Merlot doesn't ripen as well as the Cabernet Sauvignon, he'll put more Cabernet Sauvignon in. So it's really a winemaker's wine.
What I want is, vintage after vintage, to bring to the consumer the best expression, the most beautiful wine.
The next step up, in terms of quality, is what is known as Bordeaux Superieur. Yvon Moe is another large-scale négociant firm, shipping over 4 million cases a year. Founded in 1897, Yvon Moe owns or represents a number of Bordeaux's smaller producers, among them Chateaux a generic Bordeaux that has recently been elevated to Bordeaux Superieur status.
The main difference between Bordeaux and Bordeaux Superieur It's more consistency of quality.
The three principal differences are that the Superior has to have half a degree potential alcohol more, it has to have a slightly lower yield, and it has to be aged for slightly longer in barrel, therefore intimating that it is a slightly more structured wine.
We're not so fond of grapes, and we think that the terroir is much more important than the grapes. To give you an example and to be more precise, we think that the Cabernet produced in Medoc would be very different from the Cabernet in California. Just nothing like. Chateau experience. 2000 heures.
One of the finest qualities of Bordeaux lies in the balance.
It cannot be too much something. It cannot be too much alcohol, too much tannin, too much acidity. The art of Bordeaux, the mystery of Bordeaux is to be a good balance. And this balance must be in harmony with the food.
This is the Medoc, a place the French refer to as the promised land of Cabernet Sauvignon. La Rive Gauche, or the left bank, is comprised of the Medoc along with Grave and Sauternes. And it's here that we'll begin our journey through the appellations of Bordeaux. October, the culmination of a year's hard work in the vineyards. The harvest traditions remain strong here, with many of the same people returning year after year. Timing the harvest is critical to obtain the optimal balance of sugars and acids in the fruit, and ultimately, to express the character of the vineyard. The soils in the district are quite poor for growing anything other than grapes. But the rocky and gravelly soils retains heat and drains easily, which makes it ideal for the late ripening Cabernet.
The Medoc is Cabernet Sauvignon dominant. That's the grape. And Cabernet Sauvignon is a very small berry. And a small berry means a large surface of skin, and therefore the wines are quite tannic. These wines tend to be more austere. They need longer aging than on the right bank, where it's Merlot dominant.
In their youth, many of the red wines of Bordeaux, although approachable, can be tight and complex. Over time, these characteristics give way to leather tones, tobacco, and dried fruit. Now, the vintage of a wine also contributes to its ageability. All wines, even wines from extraordinary vintages, eventually peak and later decline. The finest vintages can be aged for up to 100 years in the right conditions, all the while appreciating in its subtle and complex qualities. How far back do the wines go in here?
Oh, 1881.
An interesting cellar within the region lies at Chateaux Batailly in the commune of Pauillac. These bottles are a testament to the region's history, and each year the Chateau will add 4,000 to 6,000 bottles for future generations. This is quite the collection.
This is the library, this is the memory of Bataille. 1982.
Philippe Castéjat is the Chateau owner and serves as chairman of the Medoc Classified Growths Organization. What a library.
Oh, yeah.
That gives a new definition to libraries.
Yeah, exactly. Every vintage in Bordeaux is different. And this climate, this adverse climate sometime, has made our consumers to be searching this vintage or that vintage because they want a wine which is going to be drunk younger or a little older.
So this is something that's going to last?
Yeah, it's going to last for a century or so. But I'm sure that in 20, 25 years, it's going to be excellent. Why don't we make an appointment?
Okay, I'm going to get my calendar. I'm going to put that in.
Okay, sold.
Absolutely. The Medoc offers all sorts of quality wines, including mid-level priced wine called Cru Bourgeois. One of these is Chateaux de Taillan, whose traditional approach is mitigated by some unique factors in its ownership.
We are 5 girls owning the chateau at the moment, and we are very fond of this chateau, and we really want to go far with this Cru Bourgeois and to do the best we can for this wonderful chateau. So here we are in the old cellar from the 16th century. It's
The chateau
very
itself
old.
was
And
built in
here
the
we-
18th
now
century and has been in the Cruz family for over 100 years.
So now we are going to
Today,
taste the
even the
2001
barrel
from
cellars,
the
or
barrel.
chais, are classified as historical monuments.
The tradition is very important, especially in the Chateau du Taillant, as this chateau belongs to a very old family, the Cruz family, my family, and so we try to keep this tradition, but to modernize slowly this tradition in order to keep the authenticity to the wine.
Cru Bourgeois producers have become very sensitive to the success of New World wine.
The market has changed since 5 years in the Cru Bourgeois. We know that nowadays many people produce wine in the world, and the only secret for us in Bordeaux, in the Cru Bourgeois, in the Medoc, is to produce quality wine.
Traveling a little further south, we come to the heartland of the Bordeaux region, Grave. Grave is the French word for gravel, and the best chateaux here are located on distinctive gravel outcrops called crus. Unlike most other areas of Bordeaux, Graves produces both red and white wines. This is Chateau La Louvière, owned by André Lurton, one of the most influential producers in the region. He has been a potent force in the development and promotion of the Grave region.
Je sais pas, il y a de bons vins dans tous ces pays. Vous savez, dans tous les pays du monde, on peut faire...
Wine can be made well anywhere in the world with sunshine and good soil. What differs are the overall characteristics of the terroir, and we have our own special characteristics, which comes from our soil, but also from our blends.
The Grave region has a reputation for producing the highest quality dry white wines of Bordeaux. White wine production here combines the traditional methods with modern techniques. The white wines of the region use both Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon.
These are the top dry white wines from the region of Bordeaux, which these days would all have been fermented in barrel. So the character tends to be a citrus character in youth, a crispness to them, and an ageability.
Moving east and across the Garonne River, we find Bordeaux's second geographic zone, Entre-Deux-Mers. This is one of the largest growing areas in Bordeaux and where the Negociants harvest most of their grapes. However, it's only the white wines of the region that can be labeled with the appellation Entre-Deux-Mers. Entre-Deux-Mers literally means between two seas, but in this case it's between two rivers, the Dordogne and la Garonne, and this is where they meet. In between them, you'll find the largest mass of vineyards in all of Bordeaux. Since the 1970s, many growers have been planting the red grape varieties in response to the market demand. Through advances in technology, Entre-Deux-Mers has increased both the quality and quantity of their yields.
This is a bargain place to shop for white and red wines, wines that come around quickly, that are very good with food. And the whole thing about Bordeaux is how well it matches food. Many of the big wines from the New World that one enjoys drinking overpower food.
The ancient people thought it was a sea. This is the reason why they called Entre-Deux-Mers between two seas.
Chateau Bonnet in Entre-Deux-Mers is another of André Lurton's properties, an estate also serving as his family home. He inherited this property in 1956 and has since elevated the chateau's red and white wines to new heights.
Une cinquantaine d'années, avec des amis, nous avons décidé de transformer
About 50
l'Entre-Deux-Mers
years
en faire
ago,
un
we
blanc
decided to
sec.
transform it and make a dry white wine. And this is a dry wine, fruity and friendly.
Easy to drink, easy to understand.
Now we leave the thriving vineyards of Entre-Deux-Mers and travel north across the river to Bordeaux's third geographic zone, the right bank. As we've seen on the left, in the Medoc and Haut-Medoc, the soils are really gravelly, and the blends from that side are dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. Over here, however, the soils are more clay and limestone, And Merlot thrives in this region and is the predominant varietal in the blends from these areas. The wines here have always been more forward in character than their austere cousins across the river. Now, some may think that this is a newer region, but you'd be wrong.
Saint-Emilion! Alléluia! Saint-Emilion! Alléluia!
Saint-Emilion, a beautiful medieval fortress town with hilly, cobbled streets running through ancient limestone buildings, has been designated a World Heritage Site. With a history stretching back over 800 years, Saint-Emilion was a wine region when much of the Medoc was only swampland.
You could mistake a good Saint-Emilion for a Pinot Noir because they have that sweetness of fruit and they're very accessible at a young age.
The largest wine estate here is Chateaux La Roque. Producing Grand Cru and Grand Cru Classé wines, the blend consists broadly of Merlot, supported by Cabernet Franc, with just a touch of Cabernet Sauvignon.
I believe that the styles of our wines is our history, it's our soils, it's our characteristics and our personality.
Bruno Saison, the director at Chateaux La Roque, is completely involved in the winemaking process.
These are wines that are going to express our terroir. They have a certain generosity of taste with very fine tannins and further refinement in barrel. But this refining is done to enhance the wine's quality, not to mask or dominate it.
The harvest reaps its bounty from the land, much as it has for hundreds of years. But there's a constant revitalization in Bordeaux wine, adapting to the land, to the weather, and even to the tastes of the marketplace.
Terroir is much more important than just the soil. It's the situation, it's the prevailing winds coming from the east, it's the work that we do throughout the year to till the soil, to treat the vines. All that comes in the notion of terroir, and the French believe that that is more important than the grape variety.
This is Pomerol, a small appellation on the right bank that has never been classified, yet produces some of the most expensive wines in the world. A small plateau with world-class chateaux, making on average 1,000 cases a year. The clay, sand, and pebbled soil is so variable that vineyards only a few feet apart produce wines that taste vastly different from one another.
We're standing on the edge of the most expensive lawn in the world, the lawn of Vieux Chateau Sauternes. But from the plateau where we are, you can see really the jewels of the Pomerol area. There's La Consciente, l'Evangile, Petrus, La Fleur, and behind Vieux Chateau Sauternes, which is this chateau here, we have Trottoir, l'Église Clinée, Le Pin, all surrounding the plateau. If you can see, it's quite pebbly. There are lots of small pebbles.
It really is. The roots within each of the vineyards on this plateau burrow down into the clay-based soil, deriving distinct characteristics from a variety of mineral elements.
When people grow Merlot outside of France, they look to Pomerol as the model in what they would like to, what they'd like the wines to taste like.
Pomerol's wines are known for their very rich, almost overtly fruity flavors. We always talk about Merlot having red fruit characters, raspberry, cherry, those flavors. And there's a spiciness that is really known from Merlot from Pomerol.
At a typical Pomerol estate, the yields are kept very low to enhance the quality of the grapes. The wine is fermented in cement vats, each corresponding to a different parcel of the vineyard. Now, why would you keep them separate?
Well, here, for example, this is Merlot grown on sandy soil, Merlot on clayey soil, and the Cabernets.
And you ferment them separately for what reason?
Because each wine grown on different soil reacts differently. So perhaps it would take a longer fermentation, or it need to be pumped over more often, or it would be picked later. So it's good to keep them apart for as long as possible.
The right bank has hidden, undiscovered gems, full of surprises, keeping that Bordeaux reputation for quality and at the same time, affordability.
People really don't know about the smaller regions in Bordeaux. The Côtes, the Côte de Blaye, the Côte de Bourg, the Côte de France, the Côte de Castillon, the Premier Côte de Bordeaux. We're going to learn more about them because these guys are making very good wines indeed, and very inexpensively.
Located in the northern part of the right bank, the appellations collectively known as the Côte, including Côte de Blaye, Côte de Bourg, and Côte de Castillon, generally consist of smaller wineries, making unique offerings on an affordable basis. Unknown for the most part outside of wine circles, these wines may well become much more celebrated in the future. Bordeaux as a region is certainly known for producing fine dry wines. But the area of Sauternes, south of the Grave region, is renowned the world over for its sweet white wine. A varietal blend of Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and Muscatel grapes is only the beginning. The essential ingredient here is called botrytis, or noble rot, nature's gift to the area.
The botrytis breaks down the grape and helps concentrate both sugar and acidity.
Botrytis comes about when the warm tidal waters of the Garonne meet the cooler Ciron River, creating a fog that envelops the vineyards in its proximity, causing the fungus known as botrytis. When conditions are right, harvesters work painstakingly through successive pickings to select only individual berries that have been properly affected by the noble rot. We spoke to Corinne Roulette from Chateaux La Tour Blanche about the selection process for these grapes.
So I will show you a very good example of the different stages of botrytis. First, you have a berry like this with maturity. After, you have this kind of berry which turn brown. And the last stage is this kind of berry, which is very dry, very concentrated, with high sugar, high acidity, and special flowers.
When the grapes have been harvested, they're sorted and scrutinized by the cellar master, because the degree of botrytis will determine the quality of the finished wine. The grapes are gently pressed, resulting in an elegant and voluptuous wine with flavors of honey and exotic fruits. Good Sauternes will continue to evolve with age for 50 years or more, with the fruit and acidity giving way to honey and vanilla character. First time I get to try Sauternes right from the cask. This is a real treat. How long do you leave it in the barrel?
It's fermenting for 2 or 3 weeks, and after that it's aging on the lees for 16, 18 months.
This is great. Look at the color.
Yeah, it's a very nice color.
For many people, when they think of Sauternes, they think of it only as a dessert wine. But when else would you serve this?
It's very good by itself as an aperitif, and it's very famous with a foie gras as well. And it goes very well with white meats like chicken or veal, and it's very, very good with some cheeses like Roquefort or Bleu. My favorite is with Roquefort.
Excellent. This is beautiful.
Yes, it is.
Bordeaux is a region steeped in history. Quiet, stately, and seemingly unchanged for centuries. But here, where tradition is the foundation of their industry, progress and revitalization are occurring as they never have before.
Certainly, the 1980s probably saw improvements in vinification. The 1990s have been improvements in viticulture.
I think there has been a style change in all the years that I've been drinking Bordeaux, and I see it particularly now that the French vintners are aware of the international market. They see what their competition is, and they're no longer resting on their laurels.
We have adapted all the time. It's an old tradition to change. In every single gesture, there is a margin of progress.
Bordeaux has long been recognized as the benchmark many winemakers strive for. Although its popularity may seem overshadowed by New World wines labeled bivarietal, the area is rich with tradition and continues to produce an exciting range of products that are sure to satisfy any palate or occasion. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have comments, we'd like to hear from you. Our email address is discover@lcbo.com.